The neighborhood looked perfect on the surface. Neatly trimmed lawns, polished cars in driveways, and neighbors who waved with carefully practiced smiles. But beneath the quiet charm of this gated community, tension was brewing. When a new family moved in, whispers began to spread, and one woman in particular decided it was her duty to protect what she called the integrity of the neighborhood. To her, they did not belong, and she would stop at nothing to make sure everyone knew it. What she never expected, though, was that her target was hiding a truth so powerful it would turn her entire plan against her and humiliate her in front of the world. The Harris family had chosen the neighborhood for its quiet streets, good schools, and sense of safety. They wanted a fresh start, a place where their children could ride bikes without fear and where evenings ended with the hum of sprinklers and porch lights. To them, it was a dream worth the long hours, the years of saving, and the sacrifices that had made homeownership possible. But not everyone saw it that way. From the very beginning, subtle reminders of their supposed difference were delivered with icy stares, muttered comments, and the kind of silence that feels heavy when you walk past. At the center of it all was a woman who seemed to have made it her personal mission to remind them they were outsiders. She was loud at HOA meetings, strict about every rule, and quick to point out the smallest details, whether it was the length of their grass or the color of their mailbox. For the Harrises, it was frustrating but not surprising. They had dealt with these kinds of barriers before, in different forms, in different places. Still, this was their home now, and they intended to stand firm. What none of the neighbors knew was that the quiet man they dismissed as out of place carried a history and an influence far greater than the HOA could ever imagine. His work had taken him across the country, into the halls of government, and onto stages where laws were written and decisions were shaped. He was used to patience, strategy, and enduring pressure without breaking. But here, in this manicured community, he and his family were about to face a storm of prejudice that would push them to the center of unwanted attention. What Karen did not realize was that every attempt to diminish them only brought her closer to her own public downfall. It began subtly, the kind of hostility that hides under the mask of neighborhood rules. A notice slipped into their mailbox about a trash bin violation. A letter taped to their front door claiming their hedges were half an inch too tall. Each complaint carried the signature of Karen, the self-appointed watchdog of the HOA. For weeks, it was a steady drip of criticisms and warnings, each one intended to remind the Harris family that they were not welcome. Neighbors who once waved grew quieter, their smiles replaced with whispers behind drawn blinds. Children who had eagerly played with the Harris kids were suddenly told to stay inside, and the warm promise of community the family had hoped for quickly chilled into isolation. Karen thrived on control. To her, the neighborhood was a fortress, and she was its gatekeeper. She prided herself on enforcing rules, but her eyes never seemed to focus on anyone else's home. Cars parked on the street, paint peeling on mailboxes, dogs barking after dark. These violations somehow escaped her attention when they belonged to other families. Her obsession circled only one house, the Harrises. At HOA meetings, she raised her voice, insisting that standards must be upheld. She hid behind policies, but her tone carried something sharper, an unspoken belief that the family simply did not belong. The Harrises endured it with quiet dignity. The father, a man of remarkable patience, spent his evenings reminding his children to hold their heads high. He was no stranger to prejudice, no stranger to battles fought in silence. Yet this was not just about his own endurance. It was about teaching his family the power of restraint, of responding not with anger, but with strength. Still, the harassment grew louder. Karen began rallying neighbors, insisting the family was lowering property values. She filed complaints with the HOA board, demanding fines and threatening legal action. What had started as petty hostility was growing into a campaign, one that cast the Harrises at the center of every meeting and every whispered conversation. Behind closed doors, the family wrestled with the emotional toll. The children asked why they were treated differently. The mother tried to shield them, reassuring them that home was still safe, but her voice carried the weight of fatigue. And yet, through it all, the father remained composed. He carried with him a secret that no one in the neighborhood knew, a secret that required patience and timing to reveal. For while Karen believed she held all the power, she had no idea that the man she was targeting was one of the most influential voices in the state. The pressure built toward a breaking point. A crucial HOA meeting loomed, one where Karen had promised to finally deal with the problem. She had gathered documents, photos, and a long list of supposed violations, preparing to humiliate the family in front of their neighbors. Whispers of the meeting spread quickly, drawing curious residents who wanted to witness the confrontation. Karen was confident, certain that her position as the loudest voice in the room would carry the day. What she could not anticipate was that this very meeting, staged to shame and isolate the Harris family, would instead become the moment her own power unraveled under the weight of truth. The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a polished room with folding chairs lined, in stiff rows and a podium that gave Karen her favorite stage. She had been waiting for this night, her binder stuffed with printed photographs and highlighted HOA regulations. Neighbors filled the seats, some curious, others uneasy, all sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Karen walked to the podium with a satisfied smirk, clearing her throat as though she were delivering a speech of great consequence. She spoke of rules, of standards, of preserving the character of the neighborhood, and each word was a thin veil for the hostility she directed toward one family. The Harrises sat quietly near the back, their posture calm, their presence dignified in contrast to the storm swirling around them. Karen presented her so-called evidence, pointing out trash bins left out too long, lawns that were not up to standard, and even dared to question whether the family truly fit within the community. Each accusation dripped with contempt, and murmurs spread among the crowd. But before Karen could continue her tirade, the doors at the back of the room swung open. A group of reporters entered, cameras clicking, microphones in hand. The sudden intrusion silenced the room, confusion rippling through the neighbors. Karen froze, her words caught mid-sentence. Then, as if on cue, the HOA president stood and cleared his throat. He announced that one of their very own neighbors had recently stepped into a role of national importance, one that demanded recognition. With the cameras rolling, he turned toward the man Karen had targeted so relentlessly. The quiet, composed father rose from his chair, his presence commanding without a single word spoken. Murmurs turned into gasps as the president introduced him formally, not as a simple homeowner, not as an outsider, but as the newly elected United States Senator. In that moment, the weight of Karen's accusations collapsed under the truth. Her binder of petty complaints seemed absurd in the face of the man's authority and influence. The humiliation was complete. The very person she had tried to diminish now stood elevated before the entire community, his integrity shining as her cruelty was laid bare for the world to see. In the silence that followed the announcement, the balance of power shifted in a way no one could ignore. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact with the Harrises now looked at them with a mix of awe and guilt. Karen sat frozen in her chair, her face drained of its earlier confidence, her binder useless in her lap. The cameras captured everything, her hostility, her collapse, and the quiet strength of the man she had targeted. What was meant to be her moment of victory became the stage for her public undoing. The irony was sharp. The very person she claimed did not belong was revealed to hold one of the highest offices in the nation. For the Harrises, the moment was not about revenge but about truth. The senator did not gloat, did not raise his voice, did not meet cruelty with cruelty. He simply stood with the dignity that had carried him through years of service, showing his children that the greatest power lies in patience, resilience, and the certainty that justice reveals itself in time. The cameras would broadcast the story far beyond the neighborhood, sparking conversations about prejudice, about the assumptions people make, and about the quiet strength required to endure it. Karen's humiliation served as a reminder that hatred has a way of consuming itself. Her campaign of harassment ended not with the triumph she sought, but with her own loss of credibility, her own voice drowned out by the truth she had refused to see. The neighborhood, once complicit in silence, now had to face its reflection, the reality that they had stood by while injustice festered. Some would change, some would not, but none could claim ignorance after that night. And so, the story lingers beyond the walls of one community. It becomes a question that reaches every viewer. How often do we judge who belongs without knowing their story, their struggles, or their strength? Perhaps the more important lesson is this: dignity does not need permission, and justice often arrives when it is least expected. The real power lies not in silencing others, but in standing firm when others try to silence you.